Good morning all, my name's Glenn Malkiewicz. I'm a financial planner here at Verse Wealth and I'm joined by my fellow teammate, Ashley Bishop.
Hi Glenn, how are you?
Very good, who's also a financial advisor. We've recorded this quick video just to give a high level rundown of the budget that was announced last night. It's the second budget since the health pandemic commenced back in March last year, and we just want to go through the major points that may be relevant to you. So where I start, there were some spending measures that were announced around aged care, childcare, and also women's health. But from a pure dollar point of view, do you just want to give a quick overview of what that means for the economy and the type of spending we're talking here?
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. Like you've touched on, plenty of spending happening from last night and going forward. Ultimately, the budget is talking about being $1 trillion in debt by 2025. To put that into context, though, is important. The best way that most economists will measure debt, ultimately, for a nation, is through what's called the debt to GDP ratio.
Yeah.
Now, GDP is gross domestic product. Ultimately, it is a measure of how much the Australian economy or world economies output on a gross basis. Now, for the Australian economy by 2025, the estimate will be around 40% of debt to GDP. So ultimately, for everything we produce here in Australia for 1 year, debt will be about 40% of that ratio. As a comparison, the US, the UK are both hovering around 100% of debt to GDP right now. So it also means that for everything they produce, they have an equivalent debt level equal to all they produce in 1 year. So large numbers, but compared to a lot of other nations in the first world in particular, we're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, but I guess whatever way you articulate that, the numbers are quite big. But one comment that did come out last night during the budget announcement was the deficit that was forecast for this year back in October last year, which was the last budget we had. They had forecast a deficit of 213 billion. That's now been revised down to 161 billion. And the reason they've provided that for reduced forecast now is the increase or decrease in the unemployment, which was a lot quicker than what they expected, which is always a good sign for the economy.
A lot of people would have seen in the news, but ultimately unemployment sat about 5% or just over 5% prior to the pandemic. Ultimately, they ideally would have a 3 in front of that going forward. So pretty significant change to the targets on unemployment on that side.
Yeah. So with the announcements, from an income tax point of view, there was an extension to the low to medium income tax offset, which was announced a couple of years back. So a 12-month extension to that. What that means is there's a tax offset of up to $1,080 for people earning up to $90,000, which would apply to a large portion of the population.
Absolutely.
So more money in their pockets.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it's an extension of an existing measure. So importantly for clients, you don't need to do anything to claim this deduction. It happens automatically when you complete your tax return after 30 June, but still a welcome extension nonetheless.
Yeah. Now, from a superannuation point of view, there were quite a few announcements there, which will be relevant to the people watching this video and also our clients. The first one that I'll just touch on was just the confirmation that the super guarantee contribution will be increasing to 10% per year from July, which is a great measure. And what we've also got is the contribution caps increasing. So for concessional contributions, that's increasing from $25,000 this financial year up to $27,500, and also the non-concessional contributions increasing from up to $110,000 for next financial year, so from July. But you can utilise what they call the bring forward rule and make 3 years worth of non-concessional contributions in the 1 year, which means potentially you could contribute up to $330,000 from July this year.
On those concessional contributions, realistically, those concessional contributions are the contributions you receive a lower tax rate, so that 15% tax rate going into superannuation. With the non-concessionals, where most people will use those, they receive some sort of windfall, be it inheritance, sale of a property, those sort of things. One of the other areas that the government has changed is the downsizer provision. So there's a lot of talk about housing affordability, and one of the ways the government is looking to tackle that is through, and apologies for those two, but one of the ways the government is looking to tackle that is to reduce the thresholds for that downsizer provision. What that is you can take $300,000 from the sale of your principal place of residence that you've owned for over 10 years and put that money into super without having to worry about those limits that Glenn was talking about. Ultimately, where that's hoping to increase housing affordability is that retirees don't have so much wealth locked up in their home. They are able to access that, sell the property, move into somewhere more suitable potentially, and ultimately put money into superannuation, to boost their cash flow going forward.
Yeah. So just some of the other changes here, we've got so for lower income earners or for younger people, also those casual workers, there used to be a cap. You had to earn $450 per month before you're entitled to the super guarantee contributions. That's now being removed, which is a good measure because it allows younger people to get money into the superannuation system a lot earlier as well, which will have good long-term benefits there.
Yeah, and for people on sort of casual and insecure work potentially, which, as has been noted, does over impact women compared to men on that front. It does mean that there's still amounts of super being contributed, hopefully helping with those retirement savings. That does make it important that if you are having those multiple jobs or having a single super account, makes a lot of sense on that side to try and consolidate your retirement savings in one place ideally.
Yeah. And just to finish off the superannuation announcements, we had some changes to the First Home Saver Super account, which is a strategy that a lot of our clients have taken benefit from. Do you just want to quickly run through the changes there, Ash?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. So the First Home Super Saver scheme is something that we've worked with, in particular for our younger clients, but ultimately for anyone who hasn't owned their first home. So if they've never owned property, being their home or investment property, they've been able to put up to $15,000 per year, up to a cap of $30,000 into superannuation. They receive those concessional tax rates that we touched on earlier, and ultimately then can actually withdraw that money when they purchase their first home. Their first home being the key point, not an investment property there again. That maximum limit has been extended from $30,000 to $50,000. So probably reflecting the fact that prices are a little bit higher than they were when the measure was first introduced. That deposit needs to be a little bit larger. The government has allowed that savings. A great scheme, ultimately enforces savings for a home in the tax-effective super environment, and one that we've encouraged our younger clients to take advantage of where it's been possible.
Yeah, of course. It's actually quite difficult to forecast the impact on property prices of these schemes, and with those changes to the downsizer contribution, which the government has said they want to increase the supply of family homes by encouraging those retirees to downsize earlier. Does that assist with the price increase of houses, or does it not? We don't know, do we?
Well, I think a lot of things have increased house prices over many years, but ultimately it is a supply and demand issue. They're definitely helping people with lower means or building up those deposits, because deposits are the issue. Repaying mortgages at the moment is not as challenging. Interest rates are historically low. Repayments are lower than they've been for a long time, but saving that deposit has been a real challenge for a lot of people. It's why we saw the government also bring in the measure where, in particular, single mother families only need a 2% deposit for properties going forward as well, which is another really positive measure to help people get on the property ladder. And hopefully have some security on that side going forward.
Yeah, I was just thinking sort of 10 or so years ago with that First Home Saver Super account, unfortunately for me that wasn't around at that point, so...
Unfortunately you were wealthy enough to afford a lovely home, I'm sure.
Not sure about that, Ash. So just two more announcements that we'll go through before we wrap this up. There were some changes to the pension loan scheme, which is relevant to those to age pension recipients. Do you want to quickly just run through those changes?
Yeah, so the pension loan scheme was brought in a couple of years ago for older Australians to access equity in their home in order to provide income. So we touched on earlier that a lot of older Australians have, as property prices have increased, a reasonable amount of wealth, but it's in their home. So the government is allowing not just income to be taken from the home or from home equity now, but also lump sums. So effectively you can access up to 150% of the age pension, and now you can take that in 2 lump sums over a year, which means you can access a bit more money up front rather than on an ongoing income basis. The other side there is the government's brought in a no negative equity guarantee, which effectively means that you cannot end up in debt to the government by taking equity out of your home, which is one of the scare campaign ads that we see on the television, where the suggestion is the government's going to force you out your home if you use your equity to have a nice lifestyle, which is simply not the case and will be legislated going forward.
Yeah, no, that no negative equity announcement there just provides a bit more certainty for people who may consider this
Absolutely.
as a fund their retirement.
Absolutely.
And just to finish this off, just the announcement regarding support to small business owners. Just want to touch on that.
Yeah, look, small business has been supported heavily and quite rightly over the last 12 months in particular. Obviously, there's a long way to go for many businesses, in particular if you're in the CBD here in Melbourne and other parts of the country. But ultimately, the main area that will make note on that side is the extension of the asset write-off provision, which allows businesses to instantly write off the depreciation on any assets they purchase. The idea for investment over the longer term being spurred on. Now, you still wouldn't purchase an asset that you weren't going to use, but ultimately you're getting the tax back on something that you think is going to provide value for your business going forward upfront, which is a fantastic measure, and it's great that it's been extended.
Really good, Ash. So just to wrap up here, so as with all budgets, there's a lot to absorb and a lot to take in, so we'll be working through these announcements and these measures over the coming days, and we'll be in contact with you with those relevant changes that may impact your situation. Just want to extend a massive thank you to you, Ashley, for your insight and your knowledge.
And to you, Glenn, for hosting this incredibly well.
Thank you. We hope you found that valuable. Have a great day, and we'll speak soon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.